Hey, what's going on guys? My name's Raul. Lately, I've been receiving a ton of requests on how I actually create the 3D text inside of my montages. So today, I'm going to be doing a tutorial on how I do so. So on the screen right now are some past projects I've done with 3D text in them, just so you can kind of get an idea of my style, what I like to do, the general look I go for, so you can see what we're going to be making today. So on the screen right now are my recommended plugins for creating 3D text. All the ones with asterisks beside them are optional. They're just there to add a more dynamic look, some lighting, a bit of effects, but all you really need to create text is just Element 3D. So now on the screen is actually what we're going to be creating today. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to create a brand new composition, just a basic 1920 by 1080 with a 29.97 frame rate. You can choose whatever frame rate you want, 30 FPS, 60 FPS, 59.98, 24. It's up to you. I like to do 29.97. So with our new composition open, what we're going to do is drag in the cinematic that we recorded prior to opening After Effects, and we're just going to trim it down to the parts that we want. So now that we have it trimmed to our liking, what we're going to do is we're going to go find a point in the cinematic where it has the most detail. So by detail, I mean it shows the most of the environment. So you can see this frame here, you get all the water, you get part of the agency over in this area, you have all these trees. So for this one, I find it good. So I'm going to duplicate my layer, right click and go to Time, Freeze Frame, hit Enter, and just rename it to E and V. While we're renaming layers, you can rename your main cinematic just to Sing. So now what you're going to do is you're going to hide your environment layer and just drag it below your cinematic layer just to keep things clean. So with that done, now we can right click our cinematic, go to Track and Stabilize, and track the camera. This may take a while depending on your computer and your frame rate that you chose for your composition, but it shouldn't take too long. So now that our cinematic is tracked, we can scrub through and check our points to make sure that they're all accurate. You can do so just by hovering your mouse over them. If they're not showing, make sure your track point size is up and your target size is up, just to make sure, because you can see if I turn these down, it looks like the points aren't there. If I bring it back up to 100, there it is. And if you don't see your target, you can see them hovering over, I don't really see anything. Just make sure your target's turned up. So as you can see, my points are pretty accurate. They're tracking to the water, they're tracking to the ground. They're overall just what I want it to look like. So what you're going to do is you're going to look for the most green points as possible. Believe it or not, the colors do play a part in the camera tracker. The green ones are the most accurate, whereas the red are the least. So you can see I have a lot of green points in this general region here. So I'm going to go ahead and right click and create a null and camera. So now what you're going to do is you're going to hide your null and drag it to the bottom, again just to keep things clean. I recommend if you're going to have hidden layers to keep them on the bottom. So now with our cinematic tracked and we have the camera tracker to understand the movement, we can go ahead and create a new solid and just name this 3D text. So now with the 3D text, you can go ahead and put element on the layer. So now we're going to go to the type tool and type out the text that we actually want. So for me, I'm just going to do tutorial. So once you're happy with your font choice, you can go ahead and turn off your text layer and drag it to the bottom. Go back into your 3D text, and here's where you're going to start changing things. So the first thing I like to do is to open my render settings, physical environment, and this is where I set my E and V layer that we created at the start. Essentially what this is going to be doing is going to be showing all your reflections to that freeze frame that you got earlier. Now make sure you keep your things tidy, always close the things that you open, so close physical environment, close render settings. And then you're going to open custom layers, custom text and masks, and this is where you're going to be putting your text. So now you can open your scene setup. This is going to be where you're actually extruding your text and making it 3D. So you're just going to go ahead and hit the extrude button, and you can see there's your text. So today I'm not going to be teaching you how to make custom bevels, but if you were to do so, you could just extrude this a couple times, change your bevel scale, your depth, everything, and just kind of make your own. What I recommend is just to go into your presets, bevels, and find one of the general shape that you like. So say we want this century one. You know, just look at the general shape, not the colors. You know, looks kind of good. Leave it as is. So what you can do is you can hit this drop down arrow of your extrusion model and it'll show you each individual layer. So you can see you have your front layer, the bevel or the back side of the layer, and then the kind of reflection part there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be applying some different materials into here. There are different packs you can get for materials similar to Pro Shaders. Since this is just a tutorial, I'll be going through the physical, which is the ones that come with Element 3D, so that it doesn't seem like I'm using stuff that you guys don't have. I just applied my own materials that I wanted. I think this looks good. If I wanted it to be very reflective of the background without any kind of unique colors, this is perfect. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to be doing a custom environment layer on top of these materials that will adjust the colors, textures accordingly to the look I want. So for the custom environment layers, you're going to go ahead and open Google Images, and you're just going to search for the general color you want, followed by holographic. So if, say, I wanted a very blue reflective one, I can search blue holographic. Search that, and you'll get a bunch of these like kind of like textures with wrinkles in them. They're perfect for textures. If you want kind of like a rainbowy looking one, just search up plain holographic, and you'll have all these textures to work with. For me, I'm gonna go for a red text today, so I'm gonna search red holographic, and then this image here works perfect for me. So just go ahead and save that to wherever you want. I'll save it to my desktop just for sake of this tutorial. You can go ahead and close Google. So now once you're back into your 3D text, you can click on each material individually. So I'll click on my Chrome text. You're just gonna scroll down until you see environment none set. So you're gonna go ahead and click none set and click load texture. Go to your desktop and select that material. So now you can see I have the reflective red on here. I'm going to do that to each material now. So now not only is it reflecting the material, but it also is reflecting the environment that you set earlier. So once you're happy with your text, go ahead and hit OK. And you'll see that it's probably not where you want it to be. You can see mine's kind of floating in the middle of nowhere. So now what you're going to do is you're going to open your group 1, open your particle replicator, open your null that you made earlier, transform, and you're just going to copy the position into your replicator. So now you can see where I created that null earlier is where my text is. So now all you're going to do is you're going to mess with the position in order to get it where you want. So mine, I want it floating above this little ground right here. So for that, I know I need to raise it on the y-axis and bring it back on the z. So this second number here is the y-axis. So what I can do is I can bring it up so that my text goes up to about where I want. And then the z, I'll push it back. You eventually get an idea of the 3D space. You'll get familiar with these numbers very easily. So you can scrub through, and I can see it's the general idea where I want it to track. But it is pretty small. So what I'm going to do now is open the particle look and just increase the particle size. I don't want it too big. Like that, in my opinion, is too big. I'll just set it to about 50 or maybe 40. And I can scrub through and just kind of see that's how I want. So now I'm going to mess with the rotation because I don't like how it's looking. It's kind of angling down towards the water and it's just not how I would want it. So I'm going to go ahead and open the rotation inside of the particle replicator. The Y is going to pull it forward and back, or left to right, I'm sorry. So I'm not going to mess with that. The X is going to bring it forward and back. So I'll angle it up like that. I think that looks good. And then the Y I'm going to change slightly so that it lines up with the ground a bit more. So this I'm happy with. So now before I do any effects or change anything, what I like to do is I like to go back into my render settings, into my ambient occlusion this time, enable it, bring the intensity to the max just so you can see. And what this is doing is it's going to be putting shadows on the letters itself. So you can see if I turn it on and off, there's a bit more shadows. So sometimes when you raise your intensity back up to the max of 50, it's going to be very dark. You're just going to kind of like lower it until you get what you like. Or if it's not enough, you can actually lower your radius. So for me, I don't think it's enough. I'm going to lower it to about 0.2. I'll turn it on and off, and you can see I'm happy with that. To get your shadows a higher quality, you're going to raise your SSAO samples. I recommend nothing lower than 64. So as we're in the render settings, we can also increase the quality of our text. So in order to do that, you're just going to open your output and you're going to change your multi-sampling up to 32. So we can go ahead and close our output and our render settings and go back into our group 1. So say I want the text to be bending backwards. That's a common thing I do in my videos and a lot of people ask, and it's actually very easy. So you go into your particle look, you go down to deform, you make sure it's enabled, and then you see you have these options here. You have taper, which will kind of pinch one of the sides, the top, left, right, or bottom. The twist, like it says, it'll twist it, kind of forward, back, left, or right. The bend, exactly, it'll do arcs, backwards bends. And noise will do, I don't really know how to explain it perfectly, it kind of just breaks the text. You can see if I raise the intensity, it kind of gets this rough look to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my bend, enable it, and since I wanted to bend it backwards, I'm going to change my bend direction to 90, and then I'll raise the bend angle. So you can see, as I increase this number, the more it bends. So I don't want to put it too high, I just want a little subtle bend, so I'll do 20. So you can see what it looks like without and with. So once you're happy with the general look of your text, you can start adding the effects. The effects I'm going to be using today are by Trapcode and Sapphire. There are alternatives such as Raise and the basic glow inside of the software. I do recommend looking into purchasing Sapphire or Trapcode Suite as well, because I find them very useful in editing. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click my text, do Control D to duplicate it, hit enter, and just rename it to Shine. Make sure you drag this below your 3D text layer, and now you can add Trapcode Shine. So now what you're going to do is you're going to go to the start of your clip, go to your source point, go to where you want the source or the shine to be going. So I want it to be kind of shooting the rays in front of my text. Hit the keyframe button, go to the end, and move it behind the text once more. And don't worry about the ray length, the boost light, or the color right now. We're just going to be getting the source point to match, and then we'll adjust the colors later. Only because changing the source point actually does adjust the ray length and the boost light. So I'm going to go ahead and move this down because I want the rays in front of it. Now I'm going to go to the middle of my clip and just make sure it's still accurate, which I can see it is. And just kind of double check throughout your whole clip, and I'm happy with this. So now the first thing I'm going to do, what I like to do personally, is open Colorize. I'll click on where it says 3 color gradient and set it to none. So what this is going to do is it's actually going to add the rays according to the color of your object. So you can see over here where the text is a little darker, you got darker rays. Where it's lighter here, it's lighter. You can also change it. You can do 3 color gradient and mess with the colors itself. So say you want like some super bright color lights, you can do green and then change it here to like blue and then this last one to red. And you can see if I raise the boost light, how it adjusts accordingly. You can see the blue starting to come through. If I raise it more, you see the green coming through. So for me, like I said, I like to do none. So now you can raise the boost light to where you want it to see, how bright you want it to be. The boost light essentially changes how bright it gets as close it gets to the surface. So you can see if I raise this high, how bright it gets. And then if I turn it down, it's pretty good. So you can also adjust the ray length. So if you want the rays to be longer, you can turn this up and you can see how long the rays are. If you want it to be a bit more of a subtle effect, you can turn it down. You can see there they are. You can also turn down the boost light. You can see there's a bit more of a subtle look. So for me, I'm going to change my rays to 4 and my boost light to about 1.5. So I have a bit of a bright text to work with. So now once I'm happy with my shine, I can click my 3D text layer again, Control D, and rename this one to glow. We're going to place this one below the text but above the shine. So for this, I'm going to be using Sapphire Glow, just because it's my preference. And the first thing we're going to do is turn the threshold down to 0, just because we want the glow to affect every part of the text. Now, what I like to do is I like to turn my brightness higher than I actually want it, just so I can get an idea of how my glow is looking. And you can adjust your glow width, your width X and your width Y. So adjusting the width will change the overall width. So if I want it to be higher, I can turn this up and you can see the glow is a bit more spread out. I'll just turn it back normal. If I want it to be longer on the sides or shorter on the sides, I can raise or lower the width X to see if I raise this, how the width or the glow is a little bit wider. I'll undo that. And then the Y goes up and down. So say I want it to be taller, I can raise that amount. You can see it goes up, and etc. So for me, I'm kind of happy with the default settings. So I'm just going to go ahead and lower my brightness to how I want it to look now. So for me, I'm happy with 2. You can get an idea of how it looks before and after just by hitting this FX icon beside your effect name. So you can see here's with and without. So I'm happy with how that looks. Now, another thing to add is what I like to do is I like to add a bit of a shadow to separate the text from its background. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and click my text one more time, Control D, rename this one to shadow. And this one's going to go on top of your glow and shine, but below your text. So now I'm also going to use Sapphire Drop Shadow. I'm going to go ahead and change my Shift X to 0, my Shift Y to 0, and you can see you have this dark little like drop shadow behind it now. So you can see if I do it before and after. For me, this is too dark and noticeable, so to affect that, you can either change the blur or you can change the opacity. I prefer to change the opacity. I'm going to change it to about 0.4, so about 40%. So you can see now if I turn on and off the layer, it just kind of brings the text out from the background. And that's generally how I do my text. So now with the effects, one little subtle thing I like to do just to add more focus to the text is just to add a simple blur to your cinematic. So you're going to go to your cinematic, and I prefer to use the built-in camera lens blur. I know lots of people like to use BCC lens blur. Realistically, it doesn't matter a whole lot. You can just mess with the blur radius, so if you want it super blurry, you know, you can change it to 15 where you can't even see the background, or if you want it to be subtle, you can do like 2. I'm just going to go ahead and do 3.5. I think that works good for this one. So say you're like, oh no, I meant to type, you know, text instead of tutorial. I can easily just click on my type layer, go ahead and show it. I'll just drag it to the top so you guys can see it. And you can see if I go ahead and change this, it actually changes in real time to my text there. So you can see, I'm just going to leave it as text. I think it looks good. You know, I can change it to raw.fx. You know, there it is there. Whatever you want. Edits by Balbino. Shout out to his Star Wars edit. But I'm going to go ahead, I'm just going to rename it to example. Go ahead and hide it and bring it to the bottom. So that's generally just how I make my text. That's just all I really do. There's not a whole lot to it. The main thing that adjusts the look is really just that environment layer that you apply. So I hope you guys learned a lot from this. I hope it gives you a general idea on how to create the text, and I hope you can adapt onto what I taught you today and not just, you know, copy and paste it just basically from the tutorial. Because there's a lot you can do with 3D text. There's a lot to mess around with in the deform, the multi-object, the environment layers. There's so much you can do, and I rarely see people utilizing it. So like I said, I just hope you enjoyed. I hope you can take away a lot from this tutorial, add on to it. I'd love to see what you guys can make. Be sure to tag me them on Instagram, Twitter, wherever you post them. I'd love to see them. And yeah, I hope you enjoy. Take care.